200 years, France relied on enslaved laborers to produce colonial commodities and increase their wealth. After Portugal and Great Britain, France was the third most active power involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Now we see that the rejection of France in its former colonies is growing. In this 11th session of the series Time for the Nations to Reap, we will examine the French connection to slavery. So in the last session, we talked about Britain's role in the slave trade, and I shared information from this article from Historic UK regarding this alliance between Portugal and Britain. It was like a passing of the baton in some ways. But I want to share some additional excerpts from this to show you something else that came out of this union when King John I of Portugal married Philippa of Lancaster. So as part of the Anglo-Portuguese alliance against the France-Castile axis, a marriage was arranged for the 27-year-old Philippa to King John I of Portugal. The prospective bride and groom were blessed by the church in the Cathedral of Porto on 2 February 1387, and their marriage was celebrated on 14 February 1387. The couple did not meet each other until after 12 days after they were legally married. King John was a rather reluctant bridegroom who already had a mistress by whom he had 2 illegitimate children. Following the marriage ceremony, he left Philippa for the camp of his army to continue with the campaign against Castile. But now pay attention to this. Philippa, queen consort of Portugal, and King John produced a large family of 9 children, 6 of whom survived into adulthood. But the name I have highlighted, I talked about him before, Henry the Navigator. He was one of their sons. He was the one who guided Portugal into the age of discovery. National Geographic says, for good and for ill, Henry the Navigator helped set the stage for the modern world. Besides finding new trade routes and connecting various peoples, Henry's expeditions began the process of European colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. So is it a coincidence that from this union, this match made in Hades, one of the offsprings would be credited with beginning the process of colonization and the European slave trade? So first Portugal, then Britain. Now let's see how the baton passed on to France. This comes from Slavery and Remembrance, and it's talking about the French slave trade. It says, though the Portuguese and British dominated the transatlantic slave trade, the French were the 3rd largest slave traders, elevated to that rank by the staggering numbers of Africans delivered to Saint Dominique in the late 18th century. Saint Dominique is Haiti. It says, of the 1,381,000 Africans loaded onto French ships during the course of the transatlantic slave trade, 1,165,000 survived the Middle Passage to encounter harsh conditions, listen, mostly in French Caribbean colonies. Though substantial numbers sailed on French ships to Guadeloupe and Martinique, the vast majority went to Saint Dominique, the New World's most profitable 18th century colony. French possessions in the Caribbean were larger in population and more productive than British and Spanish holdings in the region, and voyages based in several key French port cities made it all possible. Let's look at this article from understandingslavery.com. It tells us that on the eve of the transatlantic slave trade, France had a large and growing population. Between the early 17th and mid 18th century, it increased from 24 million to 26 million. But this was a fractured nation. Serious internal upheavals in the 16th century, regional and above all religious conflicts, were to have negative consequences for French involvement in the embryonic slave system and the prospects it afforded. And now we're going to see why. It says the harsh treatment of French Protestants, the Huguenots, seriously set back the development of the country's overseas trade and settlement. Although among France's most prominent and enterprising business people, the Huguenots were persecuted and massacred, and many fled to the Netherlands, England, and the Americas. The group that would have financed and managed oceanic trade and commerce was lost to France, to the nation's great economic disadvantage. So it says, in addition, the immigration of French settlers overseas was smaller and slower than the English equivalent. This partly explains why French colonial development lagged behind its English counterpart. The personal impulses behind migration and overseas trade, the willingness of individuals and small groups to take risks and work together in dangerous maritime ventures were much less common in France. On top of that, in the early 17th century, just when the English state was actively encouraging and supporting such ventures, the French monarchy was preoccupied with its political struggles against both the Huguenots and rebellious aristocrats, while the English were settling a string of key colonies in North America and especially the Caribbean. The French were bogged down by domestic troubles. So France came in later, but we're going to see that they made up for it. It says the French state sponsored and encouraged missionary drives into the Americas led mainly by Jesuits. But the conflicts with the Huguenots and uprisings in a number of French ports on the Atlantic made the monarchy wary of the very regions that would have sustained overseas expansion and trade. So I'm going to drop down. It says France also came late to the slave trade. A company set up to trade in Guinea received a royal charter in 1635, and the French slave trade was formally authorized 13 years later, but on condition that the enslaved Africans were converted to Christianity. By then, the English had trafficked perhaps 100,000 Africans across the Atlantic. This meant that French planters in the Caribbean who needed African captives had to secure slave laborers from Dutch traders. So the end result was that France's involvement in the slave trade and in slavery lagged behind that of other major European maritime nations. But during the course of the 18th century, France was to catch up and, on the eve of the Revolution of 1789, threatened to surpass the dominant slave trading power, the British, thanks largely to the explosive expansion of the French slave colony of Saint Dominique, now Haiti. Now we'll look at Haiti's rebellion against France. and how France dealt with it. The effects are still being felt in Haiti today. This comes from the conversation, and it's entitled, When France Extorted Haiti, the Greatest Heist in History. It says Haiti officially declared its independence from France in 1804. In October 1806, the country was split into two, with Alexandre Pétion ruling in the south and Henry Christophe ruling in the north, despite the fact that both of Haiti's rulers were veterans of the Haitian Revolution. The French had never quite given up on reconquering their former colony. So in 1814, King Louis XVIII, who had helped overthrow Napoleon earlier that year, sent 3 commissioners to Haiti to assess the willingness of the country's rulers to surrender. Christophe, having made himself a king in 1811, remained obstinate in the face of France's exposed plan to bring back slavery. Threatening war, the most prominent member of Christophe's cabinet, Baron de Veste, insisted our independence will be guaranteed by the tips of our bayonets. In other words, we're not giving up. So in contrast, Pétion, the ruler of the South, was willing to negotiate, hoping that the country might be able to pay France for recognition of its independence. In 1803, Napoleon had sold Louisiana to the United States for $15 million. Using this number as his compass, Pétion proposed paying the same amount, unwilling to compromise with those he viewed as runaway slaves. Louis XVIII rejected the offer. Pétion died suddenly in 1818, but Jean-Pierre Boyer, his successor, kept up the negotiations. Talks, however, continued to stall due to Christophe's stubborn opposition. So once Christophe died in 1820, October 1820, Boyer was able to reunify the two sides of the country. However, even with the obstacle of Christophe gone, Boyer repeatedly failed to successfully negotiate France's recognition of independence. In other words, France is saying, we're not going to negotiate with you because we still consider you to be our colony. So determined to gain at least suzerainty over the island, which means he was trying to maintain some internal autonomy, even though France would control it all, really. It says, which would have made Haiti a protectorate of France. Louis XVIII's successor, Charles X, rebuked the 2 commissioners Boyer sent to Paris in 1824 to try to negotiate an indemnity in exchange for recognition. On April 17, 1825, the French king suddenly changed his mind. He issued a decree stating France would recognize Haitian independence, but listen to this, only at the price of 150 million francs. Now you all just think about how much money that was during that time. It says this was around 10 times the amount the U.S. had paid for the Louisiana Territory. The sum was meant to compensate the French colonists for their lost revenues from slavery. It's a shakedown. In other words, we can see that France, the French, have been low down, dirty, rotten scoundrels for centuries. But are we surprised? No. The root is rotten. So listen, it says Baron de Macau, whom Charles X sent to deliver the ordinance arrived in Haiti in July, accompanied by a squadron of 14 brigs of war, carrying more than 500 cannons. Rejection of the ordinance almost certainly meant war. This was not diplomacy, it was extortion. So it's like, you either agree to these terms or we will just blow up the island. So it says, with the threat of violence looming, on July 11, 1825, Boyer signed the fatal document, which stated, the present inhabitants of the French part of Saint Dominique shall pay in 5 equal installments the sum of 150 million francs, destined to indemnify the former colonists. Listen, it says newspaper articles from the period reveal that the French king knew the Haitian government was hardly capable of making these payments, as the total was more than 10 times Haiti's annual budget. This was a shakedown, you all. It says the rest of the world seemed to agree that the amount was absurd, but not one of them intervened. This is how a pimp behaves. One British journalist noted that the enormous price constituted a sum which few states in Europe could bear to sacrifice. It says, forced to borrow 30 million francs from French banks, they had to borrow the money from the people who were ripping them off. Forced to borrow 30 million francs from French banks to make the first 2 payments, it was hardly a surprise to anyone when Haiti defaulted soon thereafter. I hope you all understand why Haiti is so poor. They forced these people into this agreement. You might as well say at gunpoint. So is France really a prosperous nation? What's really upholding the French economy? It's certainly not their own hard work. It's extortion. And this is what they were doing in Niger. They are living large on the resources of the nations they colonize. This is shameful, but they have no shame. Let's keep going. It says, the new French king sent another expedition in 1838 with 12 warships to force the Haitian president's hand. The 1838 revision, inaccurately labeled Treaty of Friendship, reduced the outstanding amount owed to 60 million francs. But the Haitian government was once again ordered to take out crushing loans to pay the balance. Although the colonists claimed that the indemnity would only cover 1/12 the value of their lost properties, including the people they claimed as their slaves, the total amount of 90 million francs was actually 5 times France's annual budget. I guess that's why French men are said to be great lovers. What else do they have time for? Not work.
The island nation of Haiti often makes headlines in the midst of crisis, but there's less attention paid to the factors underlying its status as the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere and one of the most unstable. The New York Times has conducted an unprecedented investigation into those root causes and is putting a harsh spotlight on Haiti's former colonizer, France. My colleague Ali Rogan has more.
To learn more about this sweeping investigation, I'm joined by Catherine Porter. She's the Toronto bureau chief of the New York Times, and she's been covering Haiti since its devastating 2010 earthquake and led the team that pored over centuries-old documents and archives for this story. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. How did your team come up with this idea?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been in Haiti since 2010, and I think I've been back more than 30 times. And any journalist that spends any time in Haiti asks the question, like, why is it like this? Why is the poverty so bad? Why is the infrastructure so bad? And why is it so much worse in other countries around it? And the obvious answer is often given as corruption, which is true. But reading a book on one of my trips there, it mentioned this thing called the independence debt that Haiti had paid to France after winning its independence, had then been forced to pay in cash. And it just stirred it's planted a seed way back then. And I started looking for more and more information about this.
Yeah, and let's talk about how that independence debt came to be, because I think as some people know, Haiti was founded by former slaves. They overthrew their French colonial rulers in 1804, but not long after that, they ended up paying France. Why?
Yeah, they called it reparations, which is so mind-boggling now. 25 years, at 1825, 21 years after the first Black nation of the Americas was formed, a battalion of French ships arrived with a message from the king, basically saying, either you give us money or prepare for war. And at that time, Haiti had been completely frozen out. America, the United States would not deal with it. Britain wouldn't acknowledge it. So facing war and desperate for international recognition, the president of Haiti at the time agreed.
Right, and you've dove into how much those so-called reparations would equal in today's money. You also looked into the value that was lost to the Haitian economy because of so much of this money and the interest on these payments going out of the Haitian economy, not going to Haitians. So tell us about those figures.
After we did all that research, we collected the figures, and we were able to extrapolate what the opportunity cost was to Haiti. So if Haiti hadn't grown, if its economy had stayed as stagnant as it had been throughout the 1800s, it would have added 21 billion US dollars to the economy today. If the economy of Haiti had been boosted and grown at the same rate as the average rate of Latin American countries around it, it would have been a staggering $115 billion.
Of course, the United States also has a long and sordid history with Haiti. What did you find out about that relationship?
Well, what was really interesting is that first you had these French colonial masters, and they held a tight grip on Haiti long after independence. And finally, the way that they held on to the financial strings of the country was through the Haitian National Bank. And soon enough, American banks took an interest in the Haitian National Bank because, as we saw increasingly, more and more bankers from around the world saw that this was a place that, despite how poor it was, they could get rich. So we discovered that one of the reasons the United States invaded Haiti and occupied it for a very long time, starting in 1917, was because a bank that is now known as Citigroup had really prodded the State Department to go in and secure its interests in the Haitian National Bank. And that then quickly developed into a full-fledged occupation. So part of the impetus was financial interests of Wall Street bankers.
Catherine Porter with the New York Times, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now let's take a look at just how barbaric the French were during slavery. We're going to look at African American Review and read some excerpts from this journal entitled The French Atlantic Triangle, Literature and Culture of the Slave Trade. It says, on March 4th, 1820, the French schooner Le Jeune Estelle of Martinique was pursued and captured by a British frigate. The French vessel was suspected of slave trading, which the British Empire had outlawed in 1807. But when the ship was boarded, the British authorities could not find its cargo of African captives. As the master of the captured ship protested the unfair charges leveled against him, a wandering sailor overheard whimpering noises coming from a cask in the Frenchman's hold. Opening it, he discovered two African girls no more than 12 or 14 years of age, sealed inside an airtight barrel. Many more such casks had already been thrown overboard in the chase that led to the arrest of Lejeune Estelle. To conceal his illicit slave trading, Captain Olympe Sanguines had coldly murdered his captives by forcing chained human beings into barrels and drowning them in the waters of the Atlantic. As punishment for this atrocity, he was pushed into early retirement, you all. That's punishment. So it says, although slave trading was officially forbidden by the French government of the Bourbon Restoration, enforcement of the law was lax and penalties were light. An 1821 report on the foreign slave trade to the House of Commons reveals that when Sanguines was confronted by the British, he sought to diminish the severity of his crime by declaring, listen, that his actions were commonplace among French traders operating between the Caribbean and Africa. And now you see how it's nearly impossible to get an accurate number of the people trafficked during the European slave trade. They erased far more than they're owning up to. It goes on to say, much like Northerners in Civil War America, French authors often trumpeted the cause of human liberty while turning a blind eye to their own material connections to slavery and presenting it as a problem belonging to other regions or nations. This hypocrisy was further encouraged by geopolitical developments in the early 19th century. Guided by the principles of the Revolution and by the successful rebellion of slaves in Haiti, France was actually one of the first European countries to abolish slavery entirely. Unfortunately, Napoleon reinstated the institution several years later in 1802. When Britain finally outlawed the slave trade in 1807, it did so in part to hurt French trade and to gain the moral high ground in its struggle against Bonaparte. So we see that the real reason for Britain pretending to abolish slavery had nothing to do with them being humane. It was not because they became compassionate people. No, they did it to hurt the French. So it says, the competition with Britain shaped the response to slavery in post-revolutionary France. Although slave trading was officially forbidden, abolitionist discourse was often viewed as a British scheme to embarrass the nation. In fact, one of the chief connecting arguments in Miller's sweeping study of the Francophone Atlantic, a study that ranges from the early history of French slavery to its treatment in present-day literature and film, is that nationalist sentiment in both France and its former colonies has discouraged a true engagement with the legacy of the slave trade. Even in the 21st century, popular opinion in France and West African nations has tended to treat involvement in the slave trade as a distant shame that would only damage national reputation and unity if discussed openly. So their reputation is at stake. They want to protect their reputation and protect the unity of their nation. How sad is that? Now let's look at another journal article. This is from American Historical Review, entitled Repairing Damage, the Slave Trip Marcelin and the Haiti Trade in the Age of Abolition. It says, in November 1818, a brig called the Marcelin, captained by a French slave trader named Pierre Desaix, anchored at Port-au-Prince, Republic of Haiti, with a curious cargo, amidst bolts of fabric, cases of foodstuffs and spirits, a piano, and artificial flowers. There were also 4 sacks of gum arabic. This West African commodity was an unlikely load for a ship that had originated in Bordeaux, and whose owner claimed that its cargo was entirely merchandise from French soil and industry, failing to mention an earlier stop in Senegal. The brig's owner, Antoine Saurin, contended that the ship had been diverted from its original destination of Santiago de Cuba because it had been chased by pirates and had experienced a horrific gust of wind that, having damaged the vessel, required it to seek safe haven in Port-au-Prince, where Captain Dessay sold the goods. In truth, however, the Marcelin did not divert from Santiago primarily because of weather or pirates. Instead, it offloaded human cargo in Cuba and then proceeded to the world's first black free soil republic for its more legitimate commercial transactions. The Marcelin put into harbor at Port-au-Prince under a Dutch flag, since French ships were barred from Haitian ports as long as France refused to recognize Haiti's 1804 Declaration of Independence. So Dessay had departed Bordeaux for Senegal and Cuba, knowing full well that the French government, which had forbidden the introduction of African captives into French colonies in 1817, had broadened that interdiction in April 1818 to French ships and captains operating anywhere. Still, the ship stayed its course to Santiago as Dessay joined a frantic race to amass slave imports to Cuba following Spain's agreement in September 1817 to abolish the trade to its colonies by May of 1820. So what we see here is that the abolition of slavery was a pretense for most of these nations. They outlawed it publicly, but secretly the trafficking continued. The article goes on to say Cuba was a logical destination for slavers in this era, since Cuba's sugar, coffee, and slave economy was booming in the wake of the Haitian Revolution. While some French traffickers still took their chances on French colonies, many slave ships bearing French flags took their cargo to Cuba, where, according to the French naval minister, they found it easy to place the Negroes, and where captives fetched a higher price. So it says between 1814 and 1831, French slave expeditions such as this one collectively trafficked, by conservative estimates, approximately 200,000 people. Despite superficial efforts by the French government to curtail the trade, slaving remained common, and Cuba was one of the biggest markets for it. So it says, to be sure, there had also been a hidden Atlantic in the 18th century, as imperial states endeavored to protect rigid trading monopolies, while sailors and colonial merchants became adept at thwarting them. What changed in the 19th century was the border between legality and illegality. Where once the slave trade had provided a convenient cover for ships engaging in illegal commerce in goods, the reverse became true with abolition. As legitimate trade in commodities served to disguise illegal human trafficking. Let's look at this article talking about how Napoleon reinstated slavery. It says, as France marks the bicentenary of the death of Napoleon Bonaparte on May 5th, his role in reinstating slavery after it was abolished prompts a renewed look at his legacy. So it says Napoleon signed this law in 1802 to reverse the abolition of slavery that had been declared 8 years previously in the wake of the French Revolution. It made France the only country to have brought back slavery after outlawing it. Pause and think on that. So it says, when they hear of Napoleon, most people think of the great empire, France's many victories during the wars of that era. There is this glory about Napoleon which has eclipsed everything else he did. Dominique, director of the Foundation for the Remembrance of Slavery, told DW. So it says the decision to reestablish slavery isn't just a stain on Napoleon's legacy, it's a crime. Napoleon's decision in 1802 to reinstate slavery not only betrayed the ideals of the French Revolution, it also condemned an estimated 300,000 people into a life of bondage for several more years before France definitively abolished slavery in 1848. It goes on to say, in events known as the Haitian Revolution, Saint Dominique slaves started in 1791 a rebellion against French colonial rule, with Governor Toussaint Louverture emerging as a revolutionary leader. The insurrection had successfully driven France to first abolish slavery across its empire in 1794. Napoleon sent troops to overthrow Louverture and restore colonial order. Louverture was deported to France. Meanwhile, his fellow revolutionaries in Saint Dominique were determined to resist Napoleon's reinstatement of slavery in 1802 and fought a brutal year-long war against the French. There are accounts of extreme violence. And you all can figure out why they reinstated slavery, right? They realized they couldn't live without their cash cow. But let's go on. It says in 1803, they defeated Napoleon's army. The following year, the revolutionaries set up an independent and free nation, Haiti. It was the world's first republic founded by former slaves, and it banned slavery and the slave trade. Napoleon's defeat in Saint Dominique is a little-known story. I wonder why. It says he lost the prized colony, sold Louisiana to the U.S., and turned the page on the colonial project, Dominique Taffin said. The consequences of Napoleon's actions, however, lasted long after the French exit from Saint Dominique in Guyana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, and Reunion Island. Slavery remained in place until the French definitively abolished it in 1848. Haiti too paid a heavy price. In 1825, France imposed an indemnity of 150 million francs, the modern equivalent of 21 billion, on Haiti under threat of war in order to compensate former slave holders. Haiti didn't finish paying it off until 1947. You all, I know it can be overwhelming when you hear about these things and you think about everything that's been done to our people. It's hard to believe that people can be that cruel. But to think that All of those other nations watched what was happening and they did nothing. This wasn't happening in a bubble. They saw it all and they did nothing. But we have a reminder here in Jeremiah 30 that the Most High saw it all as well, and He will be the one to make all of them pay. Their downfall has already started. Let's read these words from Jeremiah 31-3. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Most High, saying, Thus speaks the Most High of Israel, saying, Write in a book for yourself all the words that I have spoken to you. For behold, the days are coming. The days are coming, says the Most High, that I will bring back from captivity my people Israel and Judah. This lets you know this was a last day prophecy, because many only focus on Judah coming back from the 70-year captivity. But clearly it's saying here that the Most High was talking about the divided kingdom. He's bringing back Israel and Judah. It says, I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. Now listen, it says, these are the words that the Most High spoke concerning Israel and Judah. So certainly some of the people went back into the land after the 70 years ended, but it wasn't both houses. Verse 5, For thus says the Most High, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Ask now and see whether a man is ever in labor with child. So why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman in labor, and all faces turned pale? Alas, for that day. What day? This day that will happen in the last days. That day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble. But he shall be saved out of it. It goes on to say, For it shall come to pass in that day, says the Most High, that I will break his yoke from your neck and will burst your bonds. Foreigners shall no more enslave them. Foreigners shall no more enslave them, but they shall serve the Most High and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Therefore do not fear, O my servant Jacob, says the Most High, nor be dismayed, O Israel, for behold, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return, have rest, and be quiet, and no one shall make him afraid. For I am with you, says the Most High, to save you. Salvation comes for the house of Israel. Salvation comes for the house of Judah. Though I make a full end of all nations where I have scattered you. We see that he says he will make a full end of all nations where we've been scattered. He will repay. Yet I will not make a complete end of you, but I will correct you in justice and will not let you go altogether unpunished. Now, if you just think about everything that happened to us, just think about what happened to us for our disobedience. Can you imagine what's coming upon these nations? Listen to what he says here. Your affliction is incurable. Your wound is severe. There is no one to plead your cause. And don't we see how that happened? We see how this prophecy played out. No one stood up for us. And the wound has been severe. It impacts every area of our life, economically, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and even in our relationships. As a people, we are broken. It would be impossible for any other group to go through everything we've been through and not be affected. I shared a video, a clip of a little girl on my community page this past week. She was so excited to see her daddy when he picked her up from daycare. She just kept dancing and singing, "Daddy, Daddy," and it just melts your heart when you watch her. But that's what most of our people missed out on, relationships with our fathers. The dysfunction it created left a wound that only our Heavenly Father can heal. We did not have our Father, our covering, our protector. So he says, I'm the only one that can heal you. He says, you have no medicine. Listen, you have no healing medicines. All your lovers have forgotten you. They do not seek you. For I have wounded you with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one. Why? For the multitude of your iniquities, because your sins have increased. Why do you cry about your affliction? Your sorrow is incurable, because the multitude of your iniquities. He's telling us why. Because your sins have increased, I have done these things to you. You all, the only thing that can heal us is the balm of Gilead. We cannot heal ourselves. Money won't do it. Prestige won't do it. Hopping into one relationship after another won't do it. The Most High has to heal us. Now listen to how he will avenge us. Even though we sinned, he's going to do this because we are his children. It says, therefore all those who devour you shall be devoured, and all your adversaries, every one of them shall go into captivity. Those who plunder you shall become plunder, and all who prey upon you I will make a prey. So France, they need to realize there's a target on their back. All who prey upon you I will make a prey, for I will restore health to you and heal you of your wounds, says the Most High, because they called you an outcast, saying, this is Zion. No one seeks her, or no one cares about her. No one cares what we do to them. So we need to know that the Most High kept record of all of it. It did not go unnoticed. The day of reckoning comes. He says he will bring back the captivity of Jacob's tent and have mercy on its dwelling places. The city will be built on its own mound, and the palace will remain according to its own plan. Now listen to this. He says, out of them shall proceed thanksgiving and the voice of those who make merry. I will multiply them, and they shall not diminish. I will also glorify them. They shall not be small. Their children also shall be as before, and their congregation shall be established before me. But listen to this. I will punish all who oppress them. Their noble shall be from among them, and their governor shall come from their midst. Then I will cause him to draw near, and he shall approach me. He says, who is this who pledged his heart to approach me, says the Most High. So this is restoration for us, when he restores us as his people. We will serve him, the mighty King, the Almighty. So this is a promise that we can hold on to in these last days as we continue to watch the shift that has taken place in this earth. It's stirring up all over the place, family. We need to know that the Most High is going to fight for us. We already see it happening. So just imagine what is yet to come. All right, so we're going to wrap up with this session here. I hope this message has been a blessing to you. If it has, please hit the like and share it. You're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. Join me next time. Be blessed, family.